Hi, welcome to Lachlan Likes a Thing, a show where I take a thing and see whether or not I like it. Now the thing we're looking at in this video is the AKG K612 Pro. Yes, finally I am making this headphone review. So I've spent quite a long time with the K612 and I've gotten to get a pretty good sense of this headphone's strengths and weaknesses. Firstly, I should point out that I bought the K612 in a mass drop deal and it was priced at $159 plus shipping to Australia. So very happy with that price. It was a really good deal. Though I have seen it go as low as about $200 in Australia. It's also, my version of the K612 is marked as the made in Austria version. There are some units of this headphone apparently that are coming out made in China. I don't really think it makes much of a difference, but that's something to note. So let's start with the design first of all. The K612 is based on AKG's very simple, very classic kind of design. It looks very old school, but I think it works as something that's really lightweight and simple. So the K612 weighs 235 grams, which is quite light for a full-sized headphone. Most of the headphone is plastic, but it's just based around these two curved headbands here, which means that the headphone feels very flexible, and I really feel like it's going to be quite durable in the long term. So overall, I think it's a really nice little design. One thing to note is that I'm not a big fan of this silver chrome. I know some people like it, but to me, I think it looks a little plasticky. Other than that, the aesthetics of this headphone are pretty nice. We have this very austere grey and black color. In regards to the cable on the K612, we have a cable that's quite nice and thick, and we have quite a substantial strain relief on the plug. The only thing I can say is that the rubber on the cable seems a little more prone to memory than I would like, so there's just a little bit of kinking in the cable. It's not a huge deal, but it is a little bit noticeable compared to something like the Sony MA900. Now, in terms of comfort, as I mentioned before, the K612 weighs 235 grams, which is quite lightweight for a full-sized headphone. And thanks to the AKG's broad headband and the headband mechanism that doesn't require any specific adjustment, it's very easy to take off and put on. On the head, it's quite lightweight. It's very comfortable. It's one of the more comfortable full-sized headphones I've had, up there with things like the Beyerdynamic DT880. And as you can see, it sits quite securely on the head. Now, it's not quite as comfortable as the MA900. No full-size headphone I've tried thus far is as comfortable as the MA900, just because the MA900 weighs a lot less, and because there's just a kind of softer clamping force as compared to the K612, which has comparatively, harder, denser kind of ear pads. That said, actually some people prefer to feel at least a bit of presence on their head, because the MA900 can be a little featherweight. I keep referring to the MA900 because this is basically my favorite full-sized headphone. Now, in terms of sound, I've owned the K612 for a while now, and I can say that the 612 is a very, very competent headphone, especially for the price. I should point out that the K612 has an impedance of 120 ohms, and combined with its sensitivity, it's one of the few headphones where I actually had to engage the 2.5 times gain mode on my Objective 2 amplifier. So it is probably best suited to work with an amplifier. In terms of the actual overall sound balance, it's a very linear, bordering on leaner or dry sounding headphone. So the bass on the headphone on the K612 is really nicely well extended, down low. It's very tight. It doesn't feel like it really intrudes on the signature, but you definitely get a sense of extension. And overall, compared to the MA900, it's a flatter overall bass. So I think it dips lower than the MA900, and it's a bit tighter in the bass. It doesn't have that sort of mid-bass warmth to it. In terms of kind of sound staging, it's not quite as natural as the MA900, I think. With the angled ear cups on the MA900, you get a slightly more diffuse, slightly more natural feeling soundstage. With the K612, it's a bit more intimate in some ways. Now, the one really big characteristic of the K612 sound is that it has a kind of dry texture, a grain to it, And on some tracks this works really well. So for stringed instruments, a lot of acoustic tracks, it's very atmospheric. It has a really nicely textured and detailed sound. Though on other tracks, it can sound sometimes a little too forward and a bit splashy in the lower treble. And when I was making these comments on a Headphone thread about the K612, someone pointed out to me that it might be because the AKG K612 and a lot of other AKG headphones normally have a bump in the frequency response around 2 kilohertz. And I actually found that to be true because I went in and EQ'd the frequency down at 2 kilohertz, and I actually found that I enjoyed the sound more out of them for more genres of music, just because at times I thought it could be a little splashy and a little forward. Now, a lot of people love this sound about the AKG headphones. I think it is the AKG house sound. It gives everything a bit more texture. It gives everything a heightened sense of detail. For me personally, I'm not so much of a big fan of that particular element of the AKG house sound. So, you know, for long listening periods, if you're not going to use EQ, I still prefer the MA900. It's definitely more polite in the treble, and in some ways it is a less detailed and less technical sounding headphone than the K612. But for just hours of easy listening, this is still the headphone to beat for me. But that said, I think the K612 is an amazing headphone. I think especially for the price I paid for it, it's really well priced. So if you want a comfortable headphone and you want a bit more of a kind of zest to the sound, I think the K612 is definitely one of the better options that out there. So I'm very, very happy to recommend this headphone. Anyway, I know a lot of you regular subscribers have been waiting quite some time for this review. Thanks for your patience, and I'm looking forward to your comments. You can talk to me on Facebook at facebook.com/LachlanLikesAthing, or on Twitter at LachLikesAthing. Like this video if you found it helpful, and as always, happy listening. The cable on it is quite thick. It's quite nice, but oh, sorry, I got to pull it on the end of my chair. Let me get that.